Things have greatly changed since I become a Christian in the early 70s. Back then, witches were not nearly as aggressive as they are now. Witches are out of the closet, we might say. John, I am thrilled as always to be here on the Midnight Ride with my old riding buddy, Bill Schnoebelen. We're going to have the hammer down tonight. We're going to have a rousing broadcast on Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie. And Bill, I was just thinking as I was listening to the title of the program this evening, that would be a great title for a book, you know?
Gee, what do you know? Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, that is the title of one of Bill's many books, Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie. So we're going to be exploring tonight what is the lie about Wicca and many other probing questions.
Hello, my friends. It is time for another episode of Truth or Drink. Truth or Drink. The rules are very simple. Every time either Bill or David, whom I like to refer to as Pinky in the Brain, say something that is true, you'll hear this sound. However, if they say something that is false, you'll hear this sound. And you take a drink.
I am very blessed to have Bill come on to address this topic of Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie. Things have greatly changed since I become a Christian in the early 70s. Back then, witches were not nearly as aggressive as they are now. Witches are out of the closet, we might say. They
the broom closet.
Broom out of the broom closet, and they're now very aggressive, and they're recruiting.
Listen, you human slug, I'm not being aggressive. You are just accustomed to slandering, making up lies and bullshit about witches without anyone challenging you. I am here to challenge you, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, to provide counter arguments, to provide evidence to the contrary, and to give the truth. As for being out of the broom closet, yes, witches need not fear petty little charlatans such as yourselves. You are both being exposed as the liars and deceitful bigots that you are. Witches do not proselytize or recruit. People come and go as they please in Wicca.
They're many times passing themselves off as Christian.
No Jabba the Butt. No follower of the Wicca is passing themselves off as a Christian. This is borderline paranoia and the enemy is everywhere type of delusional thinking you bigots allow yourselves to fall into. I have been to several churches throughout my life, and I did not publicly announce that I was a witch. I did make it clear that I was not a Christian.
And Bill, just tell us, what is the lie about Wicca? Satan's Little White Lie.
I find this incredibly ironic. Bill could not tell the truth to save his own life. He is a pathological liar. He makes up stories and falsifies information. He is deceitful and he has broken every oath ever taken without hesitation. He is the most untrustworthy, deceitful bigot ever to walk the earth, and he is incapable of telling the truth. Anyone who swears an oath, and in the case of Freemasons, on a Bible, and then later breaks that oath, has already discredited himself untrustable and is void of honor and respect. Bill's biography reads like a cheap science fiction novel on the occult. He claims to have seen demons, then proceeded to seek them out while also studying to be a Catholic priest. At the same time, he claimed to be a practicing witch, a UFO chaser, a Satanist, a Druid, an order that never existed by the way, a Mormon, a Freemason, a vampire living off nothing but human blood for 18 months, and most recently added the title of voodoo priest to his Tales of Suspense biography. According to Bill's own biography, in 1968 in Boston, he was initiated into Algard. Nope, no record of you being of the Alexandrian Gardnerian tradition. Not sure about this group, but it was not a legitimate or valid group, and there is no record of it. 1973, again in Boston, initiated as a first-degree Alexandrian witch. You studied for a few months and you never got elevated any higher. You never achieved a high enough degree to initiate others. You were also power-hungry and a pest. Again, 1973 in Arkansas, the Druid order you claim to have been in never existed. It most likely was another charlatan such as yourself claiming to have some deep unknown secret of the Druids. But no, if it ever existed, it was a scam. You have claimed to be a 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite and other occasions a Freemason of the Palladium Rite, a rite which never existed. The truth, however, is there is record in April of 76 you being in the Wisconsin Lodge number 0122 where you were elected. In May 76 in same lodge you became and entered apprenticed. August 76 Fellow of the Craft, November of 76 as a Master Mason. You resigned from the lodge in 1981 and you were suspended as a Mason in 1986. I really do not want to place an emphasis on meticulously picking apart his supposed record of associations with any of these organizations. It is very plain that he had an ulterior motive. From what I have gathered, he was an annoying little egotistical prick who was busy licking sheets of LSD and harassing women, who, by the way, rejected his advances, and he was forced out of a group run by Oberon and Morning Glory Zell. Of course, this little incident you purposely left out of both your books Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie, and Lucifer Dethroned. I wonder why. Was it because you were married at the time?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to first of all address what it is, what Wicca purports to be, and then actually is, because that in itself is one of the lies.
Listen, old Father Time, traditional Wicca does not purport to be anything other than what it is. Gardnerian witchcraft was founded by Gerald B. Gardner, Alexandrian witchcraft was founded by Alex and Maxine Sanders, and their histories are well known to their adherents. This is what it actually is. What it is not is what you claim it to be.
But essentially, the word W-I-C-C-A is actually, in Old English, is pronounced Wicca, but hardly anybody says it that way today because it just confuses people. And it's the origin of the word witch. And when I first, I became a witch in 1968.
Nope. There is no record of you being of the Alexandrian Gardnerian tradition. In 1968 in Boston, and I'm not sure who this was, but it was not legitimate or a valid group.
So that's coming up on a half a century ago. Man, that sounds like a long time. But hallelujah.
It's a long time. It just doesn't sound like it. That's the year I graduated high school. And that is a long time.
Yeah. So in any event, I got into witchcraft, and I was told then that the word Wicca or Wicca meant wise one.
Listen, you Santa Claus reject. I'm not sure what you learned during your brief studies in 1973, but whatever penetrated your LSD-infected mind, I highly suspect as erroneous. A common title in Wicca is the Craft of the Wise, but that is based on folklore rather than etymology.
And it was frugally called the Craft of the Wise. And you'll still hear that to this very day. That's not true.
Yes, Toilet Paper Beard, as I stated before, it is a title based on folklore.
If you go to the Oxford Dictionary, the OED, which is like kind of the Bible of the English language, so to speak, it'll tell you that it means something that is twisted or bent.
No, the etymology of the word witch from the Oxford English Dictionary, the term witch. It's a noun, a woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as wearing a black hat and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick. A follower or practitioner of Wicca or of modern witchcraft. An ugly or unpleasant woman. a girl or woman who is bewitchingly attractive, an edible North Atlantic flatfish. The etymology of the word witch is witch. In Old English, witche, female magician sorceress, in later use, especially a woman supposed to have dealings with the devil or evil spirits and be able by their cooperation to perform supernatural acts. Feminine of Old English, witcha, sorcerer, wizard man who practices witchcraft or magic, from the verb witchian, to practice witchcraft, compare it to Low German, Wiccan, to use witchcraft, wicker, soothsayer. Old English Dictionary says of uncertain origin, none of the proposed etymologies of witch is free from phonetic or semantic difficulties. Its connection with Old English wiggly, divination, and idol, says that the nouns represent a Proto-Germanic witchja, necromancer, one who wakes the dead, from the Proto-Indo-European wegyo, from weg, to be strong, be lively. A link to both the descriptions will be below.
And it contains, I think, in terms of this context, the idea of someone that is able either through drugs.
No, Snuffleupagus, it doesn't say that in either the OED or in the etymology.
Or through magical power to bend or to twist reality. Okay, so that's the word. Now, basically what it is and what it is not, I want to say up front, it is not Satanism, at least not consciously. And let me explain what I mean by that. Most witches, including when I was a Wiccan, if you were to ask me, well, don't you worship the devil? I would say, no, we don't even believe in the devil. And, and that's true of most witches. Most witches don't believe in the devil, and they would not want to be called Satanists. But the problem is, ultimately, and of course, this is what drives everybody, including witches, up the wall, but according to the Bible, there's only two choices here spiritually. You can either worship Yahweh, the Almighty Creator of the universe, through His Son, Yahushua the Messiah, or you can worship some sort of mask of the devil.
Where does it say that? Are you also somehow able to know the mind of your God? It doesn't say anything about you can either worship God or the devil or any mask thereof.
And that mask could be the goddess or the god of Wicca. It could be the god of Buddhism. It could be the god of whatever. All of the, including things like the Mary cult in the Catholic Church or the Mormons. All of these things are just masks of Satan.
Where does it say that? It doesn't say anything about other gods and goddesses being a mask of the devil or Satan.
So, but most witches do not understand that. They don't. So that is one thing we want to make clear, that at least consciously speaking, witches don't think of themselves as Satanists. They don't sacrifice animals. They don't sacrifice babies. They don't do any of the things that people associate with devil worship or with hardcore Satanism or even softcore Satanism, like the Church of Satan. So we want to make that clear. Most witches are nice people.
Whoop, sorry about that. I didn't mean to hit the buzzer. Carry on.
Most witches, they're sincere, but they're sincerely deceived.
What the hell are you talking about, Billy Goat? Provide your definition of softcore and hardcore Satanism, and then give verifiable examples of both. There are various factions of Satanism. To my knowledge, established groups may or may not identify with other groups, for example, the Church of Set and the Church of Satan, but they are not defined by softcore or hardcore. Witches are not deceived. You are under the blind assumption that your form of Christianity is somehow the only true religion in the entire world. Witches, such as myself, simply do not believe in your religion, nor do I necessarily recognize its dogma, ethics, beliefs, and or mythology.
As David has already mentioned, you stole one of my lines there, David. In recent years, the witches have become more aggressive, both spiritually and politically.
No, Grandpa Hippie. Witches have autonomy. Their political views are their own. Although they tend to be more educated and outspoken than others, I would not call that being more aggressive, rather being more informed. As for spiritually aggressive, what the hell does that even mean? How does one become more spiritually aggressive, or passive for that matter? I think you have been believing your own lies for way too long.
And that is very important to understand. You know, the most obvious example is, of course, this thing with Donald Trump, where a couple of months ago in February, you know, this was started, oh, every waning moon, we're going to be putting spells on Donald Trump to make sure he fails at everything he does. Well, that's not very nice. You know, that's not your typical thing that, you know, like I would never have dreamt of doing something like that 30 or 40 years ago.
Patriotic witches, are they?
Well, no, they're not. I mean, you know, and of course, I don't know that witches have ever been that patriotic, although, of course, there are witches in the armed services. There are witches that are police officers. There are, you know, they're in every branch of private and public life. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in politics.
Although I've never supported public spell workings, disagreeing with our leaders does not make one unpatriotic. It is actually very patriotic. The Constitution allows for, and I quote, "the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." How witches choose to do this is up to them, as long as it is peaceful.
But that's kind of off topic. Now, the other thing I want to say that Wicca is not is when I got into this stuff back in 1968.
Wow. All that LSD has really taken a toll on your brain, Slick Willie. Since traditional Wicca covens are lineage-based and all initiations are recorded, if there is no record of your initiation, you cannot claim that as a downline. You were not initiated into the Algard in 1968. The membership you had with the Wicca was for a few brief months in 1973, where you were initiated into an Alexandrian coven as a first degree.
The line was that Wicca comes from this ancient, almost literally Stone Age religion.
Gerald Gardner claimed to have been initiated into the New Forest Coven in September of 1939, and other scholars have tried to find proof of the New Forest Coven. Despite the question of when Wicca popped into existence, it is very clear that Gerald Gardner's form of witchcraft is based on previous sources, much of which shares similarities to ancient manuscripts going back to the 15th centuries, and possibly earlier. So, until more conclusive evidence is presented, most scholars would agree that Gardner's witchcraft started in September of 1939. However, its connection to the Western occult tradition is undeniable and predates Gardner.
The most ancient religion of all. And that's why it's called, you know, Il Vecchio Religione in Italian, the old religion.
Actually, no. That is what people called Stregheria, which is a form of Italian witchcraft, popularized by Raven Grimassi, and not Gardner's form of witchcraft. Links are below if you'd like to find out more information.
It's because it's believed that it's the most ancient religion of all. And if you understand that religion is not a good thing, then that could be said to be true. But the Wicca thing that we see today is basically a product of the early 20th century. It isn't, you know, like Gerald Gardner, who started the modern Wicca revival in the early 50s of the last century. He claimed that he had access to this coven in the New Forest region, and that they went back thousands of years to Paleolithic times.
No, you patron saint of bullshit. As I mentioned before, Gardner's witchcraft is based on older material. Gardner claims to have been initiated into the New Forest Coven in 1939. He also was in possession of material that predates 1939. Researching what our ancient British, Saxon, and even Celtic tribal peoples practiced, it is very much a part of modern-day paganism. There are many historical documents of the Western occult tradition that go back to the 16th century, as well as many folklore traditions that have survived today. today. Trying to isolate and sever Gardner's contribution to this is akin to tossing the baby out with the bathwater. Simply stating that Gardner created Wicca is like saying that Gerald Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company, invented the wheel. The rituals, tradition, and folklore have been there. He didn't invent them. He utilized them.
And this was this ancient religion of matriarchal goddess worship.
What the fuck did you learn from your brief encounter with the Alexandrians in 1973? Did you even listen to anything anybody had to say? Alexandrian witchcraft, much like Gardner's witchcraft, has a god and a goddess figure, which are considered equal. Balance of male and female is central in traditional Wicca practice.
And most serious scholars, even witch scholars, someone who's an historian of Wicca like Margot Adler, admits that this was probably entirely made up.
Margot Adler never claimed that. You never cited this in your book, and I've never come across this. In her monumental book from 1979, Drawing Down the Moon, Chapter 4, The Wiccan Revival, Margot Adler poses this question to many she interviewed. She herself takes an anthropological standpoint and offers no conclusion. As with many historians, like Philip Heselton and Judy Harrow mentioned previously, the answer is not so clear. Gardner's witchcraft is based off of ancient practice and folklore. It was not invented out of thin air. Even Doreen Valiente, who helped Gardner forge a new and better Book of Shadows, the Wicca liturgy, if you will, admitted in The Witch's Way, 1981, page 49, chapter 5, that some of the material must have been copied from someone else's book.
He got together with someone who was a lot more sinister, Aleister Crowley, and put together this Book of Shadows, which was kind of like the Bible of Gardnerian and some other branches of Wicca.
Crowley had no direct influence in the development of Gardner's form of witchcraft. Although Gardner included Crowley's writings in some rituals, Crowley passed away on December 1st of 1947. Gardner first met Crowley briefly for a few days between May and June of 1947.
And, ran off with it, and basically created a religion out of whole cloth.
No, you anorexic garden gnome. Gardner did not create his practice out of whole cloth. His form of witchcraft is clearly based off earlier material, as I have referenced below. Writers such as Sorita Dieste and David Rankin, Aidan Kelly, and Philip Heselton have done extensive research into his material.
That in the case of Gardner, it kind of, it played on his predilections. Gardner was a elderly guy who was a retired British civil servant. He was a nudist, so he decided that Wicca would be involve nudity.
Although it is traditional to practice nude, I doubt many Wiccans today do so except on rare occasions and in the privacy of members' homes. In Aradia, The Gospel of the Witches, written by Charles Leland in 1899, he mentions witches being naked in their rites of Diana. Ye shall be naked in your rites, both men and women also. Line 12, page 7. Gerald Gardner was a nudist. Although we have evolved to wear skins over our naked bodies to protect and keep us warm, nakedness is our natural state. Hundreds of years of conditioning, shame, and guilt have made us view our natural state as something unnatural and something we have to cover up.
That everybody, and mind you, all witches don't do this. Many of them wear robes instead, and some of them just wear regular, street attire. But the Gardnerian and the Alexandrians and some of the early groups from the 60s and 70s, they all worship what's called sky-clad, which means they're wearing nothing but the sky. And he also was into sadomasochism.
I was not aware you knew his sexual preferences. I also do not know why it matters. For example, I would not use your admission of homosexual activity as some negative against you, just because you admitted on page 200 of your book, Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie, that you enjoyed a little boy-on-boy action, and that even in college you were able to fight off the desires of getting some hard D. The fact that you suppressed this aspect of yourself and tried to deny who you really are makes me realize how sad and pathetic you are. Come on, Bill. Give in to temptation. You know you want to ride that hunk of man flesh into the kingdom of God. His second coming. Oh yeah, you know it, you bad, naughty boy.
This Gardner fellow, he liked to be whipped by domineering women.
If he liked to be whipped by dominating women, why do you mention it in your book only once, where whipping takes place from a man to a woman? Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie, page 28. As she kneels bound and nude in fetal position, he whips her. She then cries, I know the pangs of love. It seems that if Gardner was really into masochism and he invented Wicca, it would be filled with women flogging and dominating men. Instead, it is the other way around. Also, I'm not sure what type of Wicca you believe to have been practicing, but maybe your high priestess was just looking for an excuse to whip some sense into your bony naked body.
And that's today, psychiatrists call that masochism. And so part of the whole thing with his religion is that you tie the person up and he gets whipped on the bottom, naked, by the high priestess.
This conflicts with your book. You only mention the scourge twice. The first time, you mention it is used by the high priest on the high priestess. The second time, where you wrote, Wiccans use the scourge occasionally on rare ceremonies when blood needed to be shed, on page 45. Now, I'm going to emphasize rare ceremonies. And again, I wonder what form of Alexandrian witchcraft you believe you were practicing. Blood is never drawn when a scourge is used.
Hold out your hand. Did that hurt? No. And this is another thing that is so mistaken about witchcraft, that this is really a symbol of the severity of the high priestess. There are times when you are going to suffer to learn.
Sexual masochism disorder is a mental disorder. The type of distress that people with this disorder may experience includes severe anxiety, guilt, shame, and obsessive thoughts about engaging in sexual masochism. If a person has a masochistic sexual interest but experiences no distress and is able to meet other personal goals, then they would not be diagnosed as having a disorder. There is no record Gerald Gardner experiencing severe anxiety, guilt, shame, or obsessive thoughts about engaging in sexual masochism.
And of course, today there are people that pay good money to have that done, and they're perverts. We call, they're masochists or they're sex perverts, and they enjoy being tortured and whipped and whatnot. Well, that's kind of what this Gardner guy was into. Well, maybe not to the degree it's around today.
S&M, BDSM, bisexuality, role-playing, homosexuality, and a long list of other sexual activities that people enjoy in the privacy of their own home is their business. As long as the people involved are consciously aware and consenting adults, I say explore and enjoy. However, in the context of Wiccan ritual, the scourge is obviously used as a means of trance. As you outlined on page 104, this is further illustrated in The Witch's Way, page 58, to get the site.
So,
I guess when you're a retired nudist, there's not that many options open for you. So you might as well start your own school of witchcraft, I guess,
that's pretty much it. And
Just had too much time on his hands.
yeah, exactly. And see, since that time, because see, the paradox is, witchcraft was illegal in Britain.
No, you really do not understand history. The 1700s marked the end of the witch craze that lasted for nearly 300 years. The Witchcraft Act of 1735 was more a reaction to superstition rather than the supposed act of witchcraft. The Witchcraft Act was a law passed by the Parliament of the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1735, which made it a crime for a person to claim that any human being had magical powers or was guilty of practicing witchcraft. The maximum penalty set out by the act was a year's imprisonment. It thus marks the end point of the period witch trials in the early modern period for Great Britain and the beginning of the modern legal history of witchcraft. Repealing the Witchcraft Acts, which were based on a widespread belief in the genuine existence of magic and witchcraft.